Welcome back to my channel, Fazbear's Menagerie of Madness, where I'll explore the universe of Five Nights at Freddy's and I hope in a new and unique interpretation of events. Welcome back. One of the ongoing debates within the community is the placement of the events of the game's sister location within the greater FNAF timeline. This debate stems from the role Mike Afton plays in the earlier years versus the existence of animatronic characters in the later. This debate appears to me as a circular one, as some events are needed before or after other events to maintain the continuity of characters. Many are able to justify the different order of events by excluding some events, which does help, although we should always be trying to use all events. Let's go through the order of events the community typically uses. By 1987, Mike has been consumed by the remnant of his past, clinging to life in a twisted form as his body began to decompose. His physical form rotted away, but the remnant kept his soul tethered to existence, unable to pass on. Though he was slowly falling apart, Mike could not die. Compelled to join the Fazbear staff, he adopted the fake name of Jeremy Fitzgerald, a necessary disguise due to the growing connection between William Afton and the disappearance of 5 children. The name change was part of the deception, as Mike had become a reluctant pawn in a far darker game. Mike would be marked as the likely victim of the infamous Bite of 87. He would not return to work until 1993, when he did come back under the name Mike Schmidt. In both instances, his employment ended under strange and suspicious circumstances, accusations of tampering with the animatronics and complaints about his unprofessional odor. It was this very odor that led many to draw the connection between Mike and the 2 guards from the original games, hinting at the possibility that they were one and the same. For those who follow the expanded lore, particularly in the Fazbear Fright series, there's a deeper layer to Mike's torment. In Dedophobia, it's revealed that William Afton possesses the ability to trap children in an endless cycle, forcing them to relive the fear and agony of the Bite of 83 over and over again. By the time the events of FNAF 3 unfold, 30 years after the original restaurant's closure, Mike Afton, now a shell of his former self, is believed to be present once again. It's during this time that he faces off against the Twisted Form Springtrap, a confrontation that would bring him his long-standing torment full circle. For many, this sequence of events seems to make sense, but personally I don't accept that. With the additional context from the books, I see things quite differently. The starting point of this theory hinges on the idea that Mike has already been scooped, since the rental facility opened after the closure of the original Fazbear restaurant. It must have been sometime after 1985. This fits the timeline when the restaurant reopened and the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 took place. However, this perspective challenges the timeline presented in the books, especially when we consider Didophobia. In that story, we learn that Rory has been at the rental facility for 10 years, suggesting that the Funtime animatronics were in working order by 1993. This would place the operational animatronics in the timeline much later than most fans expect. Meanwhile, the 4th closet happens in 1996, and by then the Funtime animatronics are once again functional. Those who dismiss the books aren't burdened with these complications, but they do add depth to the overall timeline if we take them into account. The idea that Mike uses a fake name only really holds weight if Mike Afton was actually involved in the events of the restaurant. We know that William Afton used a fake name in 1995 to gain access to the restaurant, as revealed in the Silver Eyes. However, we have no example that Mike did the same. Then there's the issue of the animatronics tampering. In the games, we never actually interact with the inner workings of the animatronics, so why would Mike? By 1987, the animatronics were already haunted and behaving erratically. It seems much more likely that these paranormal disturbances are the real reason for the tampering accusations. Next, there's the question of unprofessional odor that Mike, or Jeremy, is blamed for. We know that before the events of the first 2 games, the restaurant had been the site of multiple murders. The bodies of the missing children were likely never removed from the building, which means that by 1987, their remains would still be rotting somewhere within the walls. The security office, located directly above the restaurant's vents, would have been flooded with the smell of decay, especially considering how the building was set up. Any guard stationed there would inevitably be blamed for the stench, even though it was a result of horrific events that had unfolded before. If we take a comprehensive approach to the timeline, incorporating all the information from the games, books, and even the movie, it becomes clear that the opening of the rental facility after the closure of Freddy Fazbear's restaurant pushes the events of Sister Location further down the timeline. This placement also shifts the timeline of Mike Afton's involvement. Mike Afton, as the player in the first two games, doesn't actually make an appearance until FNAF 3. In fact, Mike's involvement in FNAF 3 is only confirmed through the logbook, which features Mike's name on the cover and is connected to the Fazbear Frights horror attraction. Other clues like his mention of watching The Immortal and the Restless and his speech to William strengthen the connection, suggesting that he is indeed the same character. If we assume Freddy Fazbear's Restaurant was closed to the public in 1987, it's important to track the recurring characters across the timeline. In 1993, we see the events of Didophobia unfold, with the Funtime animatronics making their first appearance by 1996 in The Fourth Closet. Funtime Freddy and Foxy are active again, and Freddy even sustains damage while chasing John. In the Fazbear Fright story Count the Ways, Funtime Freddy is recovered from the scrapyard and partially repaired. Tragically, Mitzi dies while inside the animatronic, adding another layer to the lingering horror surrounding these machines. The logbook itself contains illustrations of the security office from the Fazbear Frights horror attraction, suggesting it is likely printed as promotional material for the attraction. Given that FNAF 3 is said to take place 30 years after the Freddy Fazbear's closure, we can reasonably place that game in 2017, which fits the timeline when considering the 30-year gap from 1987. The logbook. Furthermore, the blueprints from Sister Location, which seems to be linked to Henry, with a possible date of February 2023, suggests that Sister Location takes place 6 years after the events of FNAF 3. This places Mike Afton's return in FNAF 3 a full 34 years after the Bite of 83 and 40 years later from the events of Sister Location. The conclusion you reach ultimately depends on the material you consider. If you rely solely on the games as your source of information, you can assume that the only possible way for unprofessional odor could occur is a result of scooping, then Sister Location must take place before FNAF 2. However, if you take into account the possibility that lingering smell of the victim's body could be the source of the unprofessional odor, then Mike might not be using a false name or working as a guard at the restaurant. This would place Sister Location after the events of FNAF 1. On the other hand, if you incorporate the events of Didophobia and the Fourth Closet into the same timeline as the game, then Sister Location would logically occur after 1996. Additionally, if the logbook is relevant, showing Mike's connection to the FNAF 3 location and depicting the Funtime animatronics as still part of the Fazbear brand, then Sister Location would fall after the events of FNAF 3. Given that FNAF 3 takes place 30 years after the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Restaurant in 1987, that would place the events of FNAF 3 in 2017. The blueprints from Sister Location contain a reference of HRY223, which may be a personal copy of Henry's dated February 2023. If we follow this, it would suggest that Sister Location occurs 6 years after the events of FNAF 3. Ultimately, we all interpret Five Nights at Freddy's in our own ways, and we're free to change our minds and explore new theories as more information becomes available. FNAF is, at its core, a collection of theories wrapped in an entertaining narrative, and the fun lies in piecing it all together. Thanks for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like to help grow the channel. To find out when new videos become available, subscribe for future content.